If you've ever used video editing software before, you're probably familiar with the concepts of tracks, clips, and mixing. But what if I told you that a system like this could be built in Unity and ultimately used as a tool to more quickly iterate through your game development projects? Chances are, a system like this is capable of simplifying your game development journey in ways that you haven't even thought of yet. Hi, I'm John from Lone Game Developer, and in this video, I'm introducing a series that details the implementation of a modular system for sequencing subtitles and game state changes. In this series, I'll talk about how the systems in my game were modularized, then I'll discuss the custom timeline elements that I scripted, and finally, I'll talk about the visual elements of the system, such as the player HUD. Now, before we begin, I have a bit of a confession to make. I'm the guy in the room that has to have the subtitles on. Whether it's movies or games, I don't want to miss a single word that's uttered. This doesn't always make me the most popular guy in the room when I sit down with friends for a movie, but it has given me the focus and motivation to build a solid subtitle system for my game. And I should say, I'm not a completely helpless case. I do draw the line to YouTube videos. So if you're like me and you're currently reading what I'm saying in closed captions, eyes up here, please. Alright, so I'll begin by showing how the system works and how it fits into the larger scope of the game that I'm developing. Now, like any game, mine has a player HUD. This player HUD has variables that control the content of the display. In most games, systems are in place to calculate changes on the player, and those systems then talk to the player HUD, which ultimately update the on-screen display. However, most of these systems are inextricably linked. So if I spend a lot of time developing the player HUD and want to reuse it in another project, I'd have to go through the code and unravel all dependencies before I could repurpose it. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say we have a system that calculates the player's health based on the damage he's received from enemies. This system accepts the variable specifying how much damage the player should take and updates his own internal health variable to reflect these changes. Likewise, the player HUD is set up to accept a health variable from the script and uses that to determine the changes it needs to make to the on-screen display. This is how most game systems work, and the reason this is a problem is because these systems are now inextricably linked. They're tied together by the health variable, and in a commercial game with a myriad of other variables, that makes separating these systems not worth the effort and would require full code rewrite. What if there was a way instead to centralize the health data needed by both the player damage system and the player HUD? Well, that's exactly the approach that I'm using, and the magic of that operation is provided by something called scriptable objects. Now, I'm not the first person to talk about scriptable objects in this way. In fact, it originally comes from a Unite 2016 conference and has been implemented to great effect in the Dead Earth tutorial series on GameInstitute.com. Now, if you're not a member at GameInstitute.com, pause this video and go do that now. It's well worth the cost, and I can guarantee it has the best video game tutorials you'll ever see. Just, if you do pause the video, please come back. But if you are interested in those things, you can find them here and here. Alright, so what we're talking about is breaking the link between the game systems and the player HUD in an intermediate scriptable object. Then each of these systems are completely separate and don't have to know anything about each other. So basically what we're doing is trading the dependency of all game systems in a typical game for one dependency, a database of centralized scriptable objects. Alright, to demonstrate how the system works, I'll create a new audio log, and then I'll assign an audio clip. Alright, and as you can see, it creates a new timeline with 3 different tracks on it, one with the audio source of the clip that I've chosen, one for the captioning track, and one for the game state track. So what I can do is start to add caption clips. And game state clips. And here I can change the properties for each of these things. So for the game state clip, the key and the value, and it records the time and also a sound that I want to go off when this change happens. In the caption clips, similar information is recorded, along with some blending information. This is implemented in the current project by creating a sequencing editor that writes its data out to a scriptable object, and the player HUD then updates the screen based on the information that it pulls from the centralized object. So you can see here that all of the tracks, clips, and mixing effects going on in the editor have been condensed into the centralized script that now has all the information needed for the player HUD to display. You'll see that each of these entries in the script has timing data that will be used to control the sequencing of this information into the player HUD. Alright, so now let's see how this looks in the final product. Let's press play and see what happens.
This is James DeWitt, leader of the East Side Rebels. This is probably my final log entry.
Now before you get too carried away, remember that this series is only about developing the modular subtitle and game state change system. If you want to implement a full-scale zombie first-person shooter game, you should really check out the Dead Earth tutorials on GameInstitute.com. And I just want to say that this set of tutorials is aimed at someone with pretty advanced skills in programming and Unity. So if you're just a beginner, maybe this series isn't for you. But at any rate, you're welcome to watch and enjoy. Thank you for your attention.